Hello guys, welcome to my channel. In today's video, we'll learn how to draft a kaftan pattern. You either call it kaftan or senator. I'll show you the easiest method to draft this pattern, okay? If you've not subscribed to my channel, kindly subscribe and ensure to give this video a thumbs up. I know you will find it very interesting. So let's get started. First, I have marked my shoulder line, okay? So that's my shoulder line, and I left out ½ inch at the top, which will serve as my seam allowance. I went ahead to slant the shoulder by 2 inches. You can slant by 2 inches or 1.5 or 2.5. This depends on the broadness of the shoulder, okay? The broader the shoulder, the more the slant. Then I've used 2 inches because I'm working with a shoulder of 18 inches. Now for the chest length, that's measuring from shoulder to the chest, is 11 inches. I'll go ahead to apply that on this point. That's 11 inches. Then from the shoulder as well to the belly, I have measured and it's 19 inches. I'll apply that at this point. Then the full length of our senator is 35 inches. I'll also go ahead to apply that on this point. Then we'll add 2 inches for our hemming allowance, which brings it down to 37 inches. And that's what I've marked at that point. Now we'll have to draw up these lines. Now we need to apply our armhole. And to derive the armhole, what we need to do is to divide our chest circumference by 6 inches, then we'll add 1.5. So our chest circumference is 45 inches. So if we divide 45 inches by 6 plus 1.5, we're going to get 9 inches. So we'll have to apply 9 inches on this point to create our armhole. And to apply this 9 inches, we need to take cognizance of the 2-inch slant we made here. So instead of starting from the shoulder line, we need to start from the shoulder slope to apply our 9 inches. And that's from here. So we've left out 2 inches at the top. Then we'll now measure and apply our 9 inches at this point. So that will be the point where we'll make our armhole curve from. So it's very important to note this. If not, you have your armhole will be longer than you expect if you don't take note of this. Now I've also measured my shoulder circumference. I've also measured my shoulder and applied it at this point. So the shoulder is 18 inches and half of that is 9. So we're going to apply the 9 inch here, which will now serve as the top of our shoulder. So we'll measure and also apply the 9 inch. That means bringing it down to our shoulder slope. So we'll have our 9 inches on that point. Now what we need to do next is to add our ½ inch seam allowance at the top of our shoulder slope. Connect with a very straight line. Now we'll link up from that point to the armhole depth that we marked and square it up. Then with this, we're going to create out our armhole curve. Now this is our front pattern, and for the front one we need to go in by ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch. So to do that, we need to measure the length. The length of our armhole is 9 inches. So when we derive the midpoint, it's going to be 4.5. So at the point where we measured 4.5, we need to measure ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch inwards. Then we're going to link that point up to the bottom of our armhole. This is for the front armhole only. But when creating the back, we don't need to go in from the line we marked for our armhole. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So that's for the armhole. Now we've created our front. So all we need to do now is to apply our chest circumference divide by 4. It's 11.25, I think. So we'll just apply that at this point. Okay. Then our belly circumference is is 43 inches. So when you divide 43 inches by 4, you get approximately 11 inches. It's actually less than 11, but you can approximate it to 11 inches and mark it at that point. Then we're going to apply the same dimension to the bottom. The same dimension we marked at the chest, we're going to apply it to the bottom. That is 11.5 inches. We're going to apply it to the bottom. So just connect these points. You can decide to mark a straight line, that's on the chest circumference. Just measure this chest circumference and apply it on a straight line to these 3 points without making this side smaller. It depends on what you want. They all come out beautiful, but having a little shape on this point actually makes it look nice for me. Okay, so it doesn't matter how you do it. You can just make it straight from top to bottom. So now we've done the front pattern and it's almost ready. So from this our belly, we'll just measure about 2.5 inches or 2 inches downwards to this point, and this is where our slit will start from. So what we need to do now is to add our seam allowance. Your seam allowance could be 1 inch or 1.5, anyone that works for you. Apply that on this point from top to bottom and link it up with your lines to create your seam allowance. Okay, so I'm working with 1 inch. Once you've created the seam allowance, you now move this your point. Just add 2 inches to that point to create the extension that you will fold in when you create your slit. You know, when you make your slit on your kaftan, you need to fold in some amount of fabric to create this extension, which will be tucked in, right? So we'll just mark that point there. We also extend our seam allowance as well as the bottom to meet at that point. So our front pattern now is almost ready. Okay, so what we need to do now is to cut this out. Then we'll place it on the pattern paper we're going to use for the back pattern before we create out the neckline. Okay, so you know that since we took out 2 inches on the shoulder line, we're going to also apply that when cutting the back pattern. So let's cut this out and try to create out our back pattern. So now I've placed my front pattern on the pattern paper I'll be using for my back pattern, as you can see. So I'll just place them and made the center front to be equal. So now we'll go ahead to create out our back pattern. I just want to mention that when cutting out the armhole of my front pattern, I did not curve in this point that has to go in. The ½ inch I took away, I didn't curve it in because I'm going to work on the back pattern and I have to use this same line for my back pattern. That's why I left it. So by the time I finish drafting the back pattern, I will now cut out this ½ inch point at the armhole. So now let's create out the back pattern. You remember we took out 2 inches when we were drafting the front pattern. So now it's time to replace the 2 inches. So we'll have to replace these 2 inches on the shoulder line. Then at the same time, we have to add 2 inches that belongs to the back pattern. Okay, so that 2 inches we are replacing is now like extending the front pattern by 2 inches, which is actually where the front pattern is supposed to be. Now for the back pattern, we have to now add 2 inches to that, okay, because we're going to fold the back pattern to overlap on the front piece. Now we have ½ inch at this point, which is the seam allowance. So what we're going to do is add our 2 inches, then add the 2 inches which is for the back pattern, then add ½ inch for the seam allowance at the back, so which is a total of 4.5 inches. So we're going to measure 4.5 inches at this point, and we'll apply it all through the shoulder slant. That's from start to finish of the shoulder. Once we connect that, we go ahead and cut it out. After cutting that out, we now fold this extension to overlap on our front piece. as you can see. So just fold that to overlap at this point. So this way we've added our 2 inches extension for the front, as well as creating the back pattern. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Then we'll go ahead and extend our armhole. We'll just extend it to the top like so, to create the back armhole. So that's it for the back. Then every other thing is going to be the same. For the front and the back pattern, everything will be the same except the armhole. So I'll just cut this out now, same way as it is on the front pattern. So we're not adding any allowance anywhere, it's same thing. So I've cut out the back pattern, as you can see, and everything is equal except the armhole. So this is time to trim out my armhole for the front. Okay, so the 1/2 inch I took in at the front, I'm going to now trim it out since I've cut out my back armhole. Now the next thing to create is the neckline. Our neck circumference is 17.5. So what we simply need to do is to divide 17.5 by 2. So that will be 8 3/4. Then we'll apply that on this point to form a semicircle. So apply it on the neckline. Let me just move this closer. So we'll just start from here to apply our 1/2 of the neck circumference. Okay, make sure it starts from the end. From this tip, that's where you're going to start from, and you take it all the way round to form your semicircle. One very important thing to note is that when you begin, ensure that your 2 inches laps on the top here before you start curving your tip. If not, you have a neck that is a bit wobbly and it will be a bit tight. Just dot around the tape, then just connect those dots to create our neckline. So if you measure this, you should have 1/2 of your neck circumference. Let me just explain that. I divided the neck circumference by 2 to derive this because I'm going to be piping this neckline. So by the time you pipe, you're still retaining the actual neck circumference. If you're going to be using a facing for your neckline, you will need to add 1/2 inch such that it comes up above the actual neckline. And when you sew on that point, it aligns and you get your actual neck circumference. So I have used the exact neck circumference for this because I'm going to be using piping, because I'll have to pipe the neckline. So you don't need to add or take away anything from this. So we'll just go ahead and cut this neckline. One very important thing to know when cutting your neckline is you cut the front separately from the back. If not, you may cut into the back pattern and this will not be nice at all. So just cut from this point and cut out your neckline, and that's it. So that's our male pattern for the senator. The next thing we need to do now is to cut our yoke. The yoke is that part that comes at the back of your kaftan. To cut this, we just place our pattern paper, our back pattern, on the neckline. On another pattern paper, we just use that to trace out the yoke for our kaftan. For this part, there's actually no particular amount you must use, and there's no shape, no given shape it must take. You can create with any shape you want. You can make it to have a sharp point on that end, then you curve that into the armhole, or you can make it straight and just go straight that way. It depends on what you want. Just play with it to create the beauty you want. So just place it on another pattern paper, then you just trace this. Just trace out the neckline and the armhole to the point you want, then connect that up. I usually like working with about 9 inch to 11 inches from the shoulder line. If you mark at that 11-inch point, then you can now link up with any part of the armhole you want, maybe straight or curved. depends on what you want. So I'm tracing this out. So that's my yoke. I've just added ½ inch for my seam allowance, and that's all. I have a video on my channel on how to create the sleeves, so I won't bore you with such details. It's very easy to make the sleeve of the kaftan. So if you would like to join me in my next video, I'll show you how to sew this kaftan as well as the piping on the neckline. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your time. Kindly check out my other videos, subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share with your friends. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.